Um, so this is the first marketing webinar that Metrics has hosted. And today we will be going through how you should use technology for hosting a virtual residency or fellowship interview. And today the meeting is being co-hosted by Thalamus. So we're going to get into some introductions in just a sec. So let me introduce myself. My name is David Ward. I am the Director of Growth at Metrics, and I handle growth on multiple fronts. This ranges from developing a marketing strategy, creating valuable content for all the medical education community, and coordinating with our sales team to ensure excellent onboarding experience for our new clients. If you don't know much about Metrics, we'll tell you a little bit more about our brand in the next few slides. But Jason, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and a little bit about Thalamus? I think he may be unmuted.
My name is Jason Remenick. I'm the CEO and founder of Thalamus. I'm a physician by training and have been through the residency interview process myself personally during one eventful season during Hurricane Sandy. And this year we're helping programs through the virtual interview process as a result, and have worked with now for 7 years over thousands of programs and tens to hundreds of thousands of applicants. And so we're excited to be here working with Metrics on this, and look forward to chatting with you all today.
Thanks for the introduction, Jason, and talking a little bit about what Thalamus does. Before we get into the meat of the presentation, we'll give you a quick overview of what Metrics does. So if you are new to Metrics and you're not already on the call as a client, we are an all-in-one platform for medical education designed for maximum usability. We support residency programs, fellowship programs, nursing, and many more. And the platform is also backed by a responsive support team that is there for your program when they need help. Our clients, some of whom are attending today, will tell you that the chat feature and support team are one of the best features of Metrics. And Metrics is a full suite of tools to help your organization with its operations, and it has a vast array of different modules to cater to different needs. For your residency or fellowship program, the milestones will provide you with actionable data and an easy-to-use dashboard to track and manage performance visually. The evaluations and surveys also allow for 360-degree feedback for faculty and staff. The iris reporting offers an intuitive interface, building cost reports and doing routine iris reporting. So that is a brief overview of the Metrics software. If you want to learn more about that, you can visit our website. But as for now, we'll start off the webinar and tell you a little bit more about virtual interviewing. So as you may know, COVID-19 has leveled the playing field for residency recruitment, and every organization has been forced to implement virtual interviews during this year's application process. It doesn't matter if you are a big metropolitan city or a rural town in the middle of the country. You now have the same opportunity to attract and impress the best medical school graduates in the country. With some planning and minimal cost, your program can offer a great interview experience and stand out among the competition who may be struggling with the dramatic change. And I wanted to bring this up today because I know that many programs are in different stages of this process with virtual interviews. So I wanted to ask everyone, what phase of planning for virtual interviews are you currently in? And I have a poll set up for this. So let me just get that set up. And if you click on the poll section in Zoom, you should be able to see that poll asking the question, what phase of planning of virtual interviews are you currently in? So if you can just go ahead and fill that out, we'll go ahead and kind of show you where you should be in your process right now. So where should you be? You should have already designated a committee for the interviewing process or have started this. And getting this up and running is not easy. So if you haven't done this already, you should do this as soon as possible. And your committee should consist of about 2 to 3 people with a senior or trusted resident that can be a subject matter expert for troubleshooting technical issues, you should have the faculty members involved who will be conducting the interviews. You're also going to want to need a program coordinator or a scheduler to handle the timeline and scheduling of the interview process. And you'll also potentially want a program director to help develop questions for your virtual interviews and some guidelines for each of those. You will also want to create a timeline of what the interview process will look like with the start date for when you'll be hosting the interviews, and you will also want the end date for when you'll be ending your interview season. Some other things to set up will be notification dates for the interview and reminders for faculty to make sure everyone is on the same page for conducting the interviews. And I'm taking a look at this poll right now, and it seems like people are a little bit all over the place. Some are creating a timeline for the interview. Some are selecting software for hosting the interview and scheduling, which is great because we'll get into that some more today. And some individuals are still creating a process and interview committee. So later on, we have some resources for you individuals to help with creating this process and even selecting a software. Lastly, you should have created documents and templates that outline the day-to-day in detail for the interviewer with a schedule and an itinerary. For the interviewee, you'll want to have them prepped with any material they need before the interview. And you'll want to have some email templates created that can be reused for contact with the interviewee. Some examples for that could be a thank you email or an evaluation email asking the interviewee to evaluate the interviewer. So for those individuals who are creating a process and an interview committee, we have some resources for you here. And you can scan these with your phone, or I provided the link for the Thalamus blog below. But the first QR code is a downloadable PDF of AAMC's best practices for conducting virtual interviews. And this provides a more in-depth framework of coordinating interviews and scheduling interviews. For the program directors, it's going to help with structuring your interview process. For the interviewer and the core faculty involved, it's going to provide a step-by-step guide for conducting the interviews. And it will also provide a view for the coordinating and helping with scheduling the interviewing and following up. We also have the resource below, which is a link to the Thalamus blog, which has a wide array of articles and blog posts by Thalamus. And much of this content has been created by our co-host, Jason Remnick. Jason, do you want to talk about some of the content that people can find on your blog?
Sure. So we've written a lot of best practices regarding virtual interviews themselves, from everything in terms of one, just our sort of bread and butter, which is interview recruiting and sending out your interviews, when to do that, how to do that, how many candidates to invite, et cetera, to more virtual interview-specific features like branding your program from a distance and how to share resources with candidates, best practices for interview days, technical specifications about lighting and microphones and practicing and all of these various components to ensure everyone has the smooth an interview day as possible.
Yeah, and I've taken a look at just a fraction of what this blog has to offer, and I can say personally that it does have a lot of depth to it and a lot more insight that some of the AAMC documents can provide. So that's definitely worth taking a look at. If anyone on the call wants to scan the QR codes, now would be a good time to do so. If not, you can message in the chat and we can bring this up again at the end of the presentation. So I just want to share with everyone the poll results from our first poll, just to give you an idea of the data of where everyone is at. And it looks like nobody is 100% ready for virtual interviews. It is a complex process and it is new to a lot of people, so it makes sense that not everybody is there yet. It looks like people are either creating a process, selecting a software, or creating a timeline. So if you're just creating a process and interview committee, these resources on this page will be very helpful to you. So once you've designated a committee, created a timeline of the interview process, and created a template for the processes, you will need to consider the solution which you host your virtual interview. And a basic solution will require at least two different solutions to cover the basic needs, which are for scheduling and actually hosting the virtual interview. And some of these solutions consist of virtual calendars, virtual interviewing, and scheduling solutions. And when selecting this software, it's good to create a checklist. So we provided an overview of some of the features that you would want to consider. So the first factor that most people are going to consider when selecting a software is going to be the cost. And luckily for the software we will be talking about today, at least for the scheduling and hosting the interview, is little to no cost at all. Services such as Zoom, Google Calendar are free, at least at the basic package. So it will be a small cost that your organization will incur to have virtual interviews. Security is another factor that you will want to consider when selecting a solution. If you want your attendees to your meetings or virtual interviews to have a password to have it more secure, there are some solutions that offer that. It should also be a very accessible software. So a user who's going to be attending one of your interviews should not have to purchase or download the software in order to join the virtual interview. And many solutions today offer web-based hosting to alleviate the pressure of the interview from the candidate itself. You'll also want to create a checklist of some of the features that your team will need. And luckily, these softwares have lists of the pricing and features available. Some examples of features that you could consider are scheduling, waiting rooms, breakout rooms, file sharing, chat functionality, virtual backgrounds, recording capability. All of these and more should be checked off the platform that you use. Continuing the features you should consider, you're also going to want to have a good support team that is on demand. If you run into any problems, it can be a real pain if you can't contact anyone for any help. The program should also be customizable, and it should allow for branding and internal documentation. And you'll also want to consider the integration capabilities. This can sometimes be a step beyond, but you're going to want to ask questions. Can the virtual interviewing solution integrate with your calendar? It can make scheduling so much easier than manually copying event invitations to your calendar. And many virtual interview software and solutions allow users to schedule meetings on their very favorite calendar. So if you have created this checklist and you've looked at the features that you will consider when selecting these solutions, you will then go ahead and look at the different solutions to utilize for your virtual interview. I know many individuals on the call today probably all are aware of the current software for virtual interviewing and virtual calendars. We have provided just a general overview of the most popular ones here, including Zoom, WebEx, Teams for virtual interviewing. And for virtual calendars, the popular ones are obviously iCalendar, Google Calendar, and Microsoft Outlook. But another thing to consider is a scheduling solution to tie it all together. So that's Thalamus, and we'll talk a little bit more about what they do later. And metrics can actually be used. We're an RMS software, but we can actually be used to evaluate the interviewee afterwards. So our choice for the virtual interviewing software is Zoom. And the basic package, or the free version, has a 40-minute time limit for more than 3 participants. It does allow for screen recording, but the files do have to be stored locally. It also allows you to share your screen. But unless you're planning on staggering your interviews or you're only having 2 participants involved, we recommend their Pro package. And at $15 a month, you don't have to worry about going over your time limit, as each meeting can last 24 hours. And the key feature of Zoom, and the reason why it's our preferred choice, is because the breakout rooms that is offered in the service. And this is great for panel interviews. It allows you to break the conference meeting to different rooms, which allows you to switch between a group of interviewers to a one-on-one, and it provides a really similar feel to an in-person interview. Going from room to room, meeting each person at a time, and going from general conversations to technical one-on-ones can really reflect a positive interview experience that you get from an in-person interview. Um, if you're not familiar with Zoom or you wanted to consider a different solution, we also recommend Microsoft Teams. Unlike Zoom, the free version has no time limit on meetings, and the pricing options are staggered less than Zoom as well. So if you want to have screen recording and other features, you won't have to pay as much. The paid package at $5 a month offers meeting recordings and SSO. The only thing that the Microsoft Teams solution does not have is the breakout rooms feature. So if the breakout rooms feature is not appealing to you, you don't want to have the ability to create rooms and reflect that in-person experience, then the Microsoft Teams solution might be better for you if you're trying to save the money. For selecting a virtual calendar, our first choice is going to be Google Calendar. And this is super convenient when you pair this with Zoom. There are Chrome extensions that you can install so you can actually schedule Zoom meetings right from your Google Calendar. And once you schedule these meetings, there's automated email and scheduling that's sent out to all of the attendees involved. There's calendar sync for your team so you can have good visibility of the rest of your team and see everyone's schedules with multiple calendar views. If you decide to use Microsoft Outlook, that's going to be another one that we recommend. It's not going to be as convenient if you're pairing this with Zoom, as you will need to add a integration. It's not very difficult to add, but it still can be cumbersome to add this. If you don't, you will still have to copy the link from the Zoom meeting to Microsoft Outlook. If you are using Teams, however, it is better paired with Teams. As they are both Microsoft products, you won't have to worry about compatibility issues, and it will be more of a streamlined process. So we're going to enter our next poll now. And I wanted to ask everybody, after just going over that, what software does your program use for virtual interviews and calendars? And let me just launch this poll here. So this is a two-sided poll asking what software does your program use for virtual interviews and what software does your program use for calendars, scheduling? And I'll just give everyone a second to respond to that, and we'll move on to the content and review that once we get enough feedback from that. If you're looking for a beginning to end solution, Metrics and Thalamus are paired very well together. Thalamus will handle all of your hiring operations, and Metrics will handle all of the workflow once all of these prospective residents are officially residents in your program. Jason, do you want to give a overview of Thalamus and all of the solutions that your software offers?
Absolutely. Thanks, David. Thalamus handles everything from the application component to assist with screening, invites to interview, setting up your calendar, inviting your candidates, and answering any survey questions you'd like them to answer. They can then schedule, self-schedule, reschedule, waitlist themselves for dates. And on the back end, Thalamus helps you organize all your face sheets and print pages, all of your candidate data, helps you manage your interview season, score and rank candidates, then allows you to export your rank list and then upload it into various match softwares. Additionally, this year we have new virtual interview features, including a video interview solution. We will also integrate with WebEx, Zoom, or Teams, and we have an itinerary builder as well. So really everything to help you manage your virtual interviews this season.
That's great, Jason. Thanks for providing an overview of Thalamus. And once you have hired your prospective residents, Metrics will then handle them for your residency program. And actually, if you want to use Metrics for part of your interview process, there is an option to evaluate the applicant afterwards, or even have the applicant evaluate you. Through metrics, you can generate QR codes and provide dummy logins to the residents and have evaluations, and also this provides them a way to see your residency program and how your program operates. So it looks like we have a pretty good completion of the poll right now. It looks like we have half of the responses here. And it looks like the majority of individuals are using Zoom for their virtual interviews and are using Microsoft Outlook for virtual calendars and scheduling. And as I stated, pairing these two together can be a little bit cumbersome at times, but if you have an integration with them, it can streamline this a little bit more. So I know we just discussed a little bit about what metrics does and our role in the interview process, but now I just wanted to ask, sorry, this is the wrong spacing here. So actually, for branding your interview, incoming residents are very bright young individuals who can see through poor branding or a thrown together interview. In traditional in-person interviews, programs generally do unique gestures to set themselves apart from different programs and sell their program to prospective residents. And some examples of this, it can be in the form of branded swag, so company t-shirts. It can be in the form of fancy dinners. It can be in the form of cultural perks, displaying your luxurious or a modern hospital, or you want to show them that you have a great tech infrastructure. And now that all of these events have been deemed not essential and are no longer part of the interview process, you need to consider how to brand your program through a digital interface. And to adapt to this landscape, you need to see how you can set yourself aside from the others in this situation. So there's many things that you can do actually in the interview itself and leading up to the interview to create a professional identity for your brand. There's other things you consider. So for example, today, my lighting is okay right now, but I have a spotlight on me, and when I turn it off, it does not look as good. You can also activate an interview background through Zoom, and I'll show you how to do that here. Just click choose a virtual background, and then behind me is the metrics logo. So if you want to display your brand that way, that is a great way to show incoming residents about your personality, about the organization that you work for. It's just another way to show off your brands. So again, production value, investing just a little bit of money in a spotlight or a microphone or headset can make your video and audio quality a lot better, and it can help improve the interview process. You can also do branding in emails and invitations through the emails that you send, the professional invitations that you send for these with the branding. So typically there's a Zoom invitation, a basic Zoom invitation that's sent out, but you can adjust this to have your logo, to have whatever you want to tell the resident. And you can even share dummy logins for the RMS that you use. Maybe you want to display that tech infrastructure that I talked about earlier. Through metrics, you can share a dummy login and the resident can complete an evaluation, and they can even see how they would complete work hours on the site. Just because your interviews went online does not mean that you'll have to sacrifice the personality of your program. And the list of items that I just discussed is just a small overview of how you can leverage your personal interview to sell your brands. And I forgot to mention that last point, with the seamless scheduling with Thalamus, having an easy way for residents to schedule their interviews can really create a good identity for your brand and positively reinforce your organization and their perception. So that brings me into my next point. I just wanted to do a quick poll and ask, what residency management software does your program use? And for those on the call who are currently using metrics, you can go ahead and ignore this poll. Let me just relaunch this. Great, and I'll give everyone a few seconds to fill this out. So again, for those of you who are not Metrics clients already, or if you just want to let us know and share your brand's colors, what residency management program does your what residency management software does your program use? And we'll review those in just a second. So along the process that we've just covered, you should have designated an interview committee, selected your solution for interviewing, scheduled your interview, branded your virtual interactions, and now comes time for the actual interview. How can you best prepare for this? It's our recommendation that preparation is the best answer for this. Conducting a trial run should be mandatory. It's important for interviewers to do a trial run before the actual interviews to familiarize themselves with the software in case anything goes wrong during the actual interview. Many issues can arise when initially joining the interview, such as attempting to share a screen, switching between panelists, and many more. So you'll also want to practice body language, practice vocal inflection, consider setting dress codes for the virtual interview if you want everyone to not only dress professionally, but dress in a certain way to display your organization's brands. That is another way that can set your program aside. Also, a overlooked topic here is practice looking the interviewer in the eye. And this goes on both sides for the interviewer and the interviewee. When you're actually talking to an individual and looking at your screen, you're not looking at the interviewee in the eye. If you look into your camera, however, this provides the illusion that you are looking the interviewee in the eye, and it can provide a much more positive experience. And this can be a little bit more difficult, as you may see that I have not been looking at the camera the whole time, but trying to do this as much as you can without being overbearing is definitely something to practice in the trial run of your interview. And during this trial run, you will be confronting technical issues. If technical issues arise during the actual interview, just stay calm. Sometimes these issues are unavoidable, but it's best to take proper protocol for each situation. If an interviewee is having trouble joining the call, just remind them that they can join by calling in. And this isn't the best way to conduct an interview, as it would only be an audio interview, but sometimes it's better than rescheduling. You're always going to want to verify, even if things seem implied. Can you hear me? This seems pretty obvious, but generally the first thing that you want to do when starting a call or starting a webinar is making sure that the individuals that are attending can hear you properly. Making sure that the interviewee can see what the interviewer is seeing when you're sharing screens or switching between. Always verify that the user can see what you're seeing. Unless you specify that you're sharing your screen, most interviewees will not know that they're supposed to be seeing something, which can lead to some confusion and time lost. If you're having connection issues, it's always good to have a wired connection as a backup, as this will not have any latency issues when you're wired in. So if you have gotten through those technical issues and you followed the steps up until this point, you should really be ready for a smooth interview. And once the interview is over, you will have to do a follow-up with the virtual interviews. It's essentially the same as you would do a follow-up with the in-person interviews. So during the interview, you're going to want to be actively engaged with the interviewee. So sometimes you can miss writing notes. So right after finishing an interview is generally the best time that you want to write down your overall impressions of the interviewee. And using the breakout rooms in Zoom can allow for this very well, as individuals will be switching from interviewer to interviewer. That time in between can provide the interviewer for some time to write down their collected thoughts about their overall impressions. And for residency programs, you'll have a series of interviews, so make sure to send any necessary follow-up emails with the next series of interviews and any necessary materials that your prospective residents will need. If you follow up enough and you have a series of interviews that have completed, you would then select or choose to not select a prospective resident. And that wraps us up. So let's recap everything that we covered today. Uh, we gave you a general overview of the interview process, and we provided the AAMC and Thalamus links to help you get started if you haven't with scheduling and coordinating. We took a look at the different solutions for your program, and we looked at the different technology that you can use for virtual interviewing, for scheduling, and for calendar integrations. We even took a look at a brief overview at our RMS. We looked at how you can brand your interview just from production quality and the professionalism, and even using virtual backgrounds and other features. And then we had a brief coverage of the actual interview and the follow-up, as these will be covered in earlier on in the interview process. So we hope that you found this information helpful and implement it for your residency program or fellowship program. We'd now like to open up this webinar for questions. If anyone is interested, I'm going to take a look at the chat real quick. You can also message questions in the chat button if you haven't already. But if you decide to leave now, thanks again. And actually, we have the results from the poll. It looks like most people are using metrics, which is great. I like to see the, the support. So let me take a look at the chat icon, and then we'll see if anybody has any questions. Looks like so far, Victoria Bengali. Yes, Victoria, what's your question?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Excellent. Besides interviewing, the interviewing person one-on-one or with a group, are other ways that we can see the applicants interact, see them work a little bit, see them amongst each other, or have a way to see them work cooperatively?
I think this may be something that Thalamus would be used for. Jason, do you want to hop in on this?
I'm getting some feedback on my end.
Yeah, also as well. Let me just mute you as we answer your question. All right, is that better, Jason?
Yeah, Victoria, could you ask that one more time? I apologize. The audio was a little weird.
Yes, hi. I was wondering if there are, besides the actual interview process, is there other ways that we can evaluate applicants, have them interact with each other, interact with us, or have a way to have them working cooperatively to see some of their social skills and group skills?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think
let me, I'll just mute it.
Yeah.
Okay, you should be good.
Yeah, all right. It's a great question, and I think what we're seeing from programs is that some are trying to host sort of pre-interview events, social hours, virtual happy hours. Some are doing open houses. I think the key really to all of it is for programs and candidates still to try and best assess fit. I think there are some programs that are considering having candidates write secondary essays or something. I think that just lays another hurdle down that all of your candidates are going to answer and isn't going to give you any more true information about the candidate. So I would say whatever activity you do decide on, I would just make sure it's something that creates value and that the candidates will also enjoy, and I think that will give you more insight into them as candidates in general. I don't think there's any magic bullet or sort of one size fits all for this. I think a lot of it is based on sort of a program's mission and their geographic recruitment area and several other factors. But I think it's important to figure out what makes your program special and how best to communicate that to candidates, and also then how to find those candidates that best fit that those characteristics.
Victoria, does that answer your question? Victoria, does that answer your question? I think she still may be muted.
She's still muted.
Yeah, I believe that is a good way to approach it. It is going to be on a programs on an as need basis for programs, and depending on what they're looking to get out of that.
Hi, this is
Yes,
Kenneth.
thank you very much.
This
Thank
is
you,
Kenneth
Victoria.
with Metrics. I have considered using the lobby in Zoom as a place for the residents to sort of monitor the communication between the different candidates. It's the closest that you can get to an in-person social sort of interaction.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Victoria. If anyone else has any questions, you can just send it into the chat or just raise your hand. And I'll just go back to those first two pages if anybody missed the QR codes. There we go. So if you missed this the first time around, these two QR codes, the top one is a link to a downloadable PDF of AAMC's best practices for conducting virtual program interviews. That provides a more in-depth framework that we covered today for coordinating these interviews. And the bottom QR code is a link to the Thalamus blog with our co-hosts, Thalamus's content. And this provides an even more in-depth look into coordinating to virtual interviews and much more than the AMC can have to offer. What video software will Thalamus use?
So we will integrate with Zoom, Teams, or WebEx, but we also have a homegrown solution that's built on Twilio platform, which is another major technology platform that allowed us some greater flexibility to better meet the demands of the GME interview day. And we're happy to set you up with a demo and show you sort of what we're using and how that works. You can write to us or visit our site or otherwise.
We'll also provide links to both Metrics and Thalamus in the follow-up email that we'll send out. It'll be a couple days after the webinar. And it'll also have the recording of the meeting and any slides if you'd like to hang on to them. We still got a little bit more time here. If anyone else has any questions, comments. All right, well, if you want to stick around, you can. I'll be here to answer any questions, but I think that wraps up the webinar for today. I'll be on for a couple more minutes, but I'm going to go ahead and end the recording now in case anyone else has any questions.